Hello, fancy folks. Welcome back to LuxeSci, where we make science a little less intimidating and a little more luxurious by exploring the intersection of science and luxury. I'm your host, Dr. Lex, global health consultant, survivor of way too much flow cytometry in grad school, and lover of all things fashion. This week, we're taking on a classic pattern, stripes. Stripes these days invoke anything from a New England seaside vacation complete with boat shoes and a large dose of coastal grandma chic to sitting at a cafe in Paris sipping coffee. Stripes are considered the ultimate classic pattern. For spring-summer 2024, Gucci, Bottega Veneta, and Dries Van Noten all included stripes in their runway shows, and Elle magazine declared stripes as the print for accessories for the season. While we've all heard that horizontal stripes can make you look wider, what else is there to know about stripes? Join me as I learn about why stripes are helpful in the natural world, what in the world charged stripes are, and hopefully navigate through some rather complex engineering philosophies. Hope you enjoy. For some background, a stripe is a textile design consisting of lines or bands against a plain background. In our last episode, I made reference to laws during the Middle Ages and beyond that dictated who could wear what type of clothing. This applied to stripes as well. There's a legend that I found in almost every article about the history of stripes. Apparently, in 1310, a French cobbler was condemned to death because he was wearing striped clothes. Because striped clothing at that time was reserved for social outcasts, prostitutes, clowns, and hangmen, etc. Were all ordered to wear striped clothing so that they could be easily identified. The stripes at the time were mostly horizontal and likely influenced the horizontal striped uniforms of prisoners in more modern times, again to be easily spotted in the case of an escape. Stripes got a more popular spin in the Napoleonic era when Napoleon himself had a stripe-tinted room added to the Chateau de Malmaison, and American and French revolutionary stripes appeared everywhere. At the time, vertical stripes were those being worn by aristocrats. By the mid-1800s, striped shirts were the uniform of the French Navy, horizontal stripes to be easily spotted if you fell overboard. It was in 1846 when Queen Victoria dressed her son in a sailor suit that stripes became wildly popular in fashion. Modern stripes in fashion is a product of Ms. Coco Chanel. The story is that she was on holiday on the coast in France and fell in love with the sailors' uniforms and created her 1917 nautical-themed collection. It included the Breton top, which is 2 inches of white stripes and a 1-inch navy stripe. She was photographed in the top, and this was a sensation because the tops were usually associated with men. And while this use of stripes was the first for modern fashion, and really propelled the stripe into what it is now in clothing, I would like to pause and acknowledge that Coco Chanel has a rather sordid history of collaboration during World War II, and so she can be considered a problematic figure. Striped beach clothing became vogue in the mid-19th century. In the 1980s, Jean-Paul Gaultier started using a stripe pattern on his male fragrance collection and has integrated stripes into his collections ever since. Stripes are seen as rebellious and bold, and at the same time timeless and classic. So, what do they have to do with science? As I've mentioned, I do love an animal print, and stripes are no exception. We're going to start our journey into stripe science with zebras. For me, when I think stripes in nature, I definitely think of zebras. But how did zebras get their stripes? Like with many coat patterns in animals, like leopards, zebra stripes are inherent at birth. The pattern develops during embryonic development, and they are born with brown stripes that darken as the animal ages. The color is from the transfer of melanin to skin cells. Melanin is a dark brown or black pigment occurring in hair, skin, and the iris of the eyes. It's a polymer that originates with the amino acid tyrosine. Hopefully you all remember polymers and amino acids. And it's produced by specialized cells called melanocytes. While zebra stripes are inherent from birth, there is regional adaptation of stripes depending on where the zebras live. A 2014 paper published in the Royal Society of Open Science and authored by scientists from the University of California, the University of Tübingen, and Princeton University looked at modeling zebra stripe patterns along with temperature, fly biting, and predation by lions to see if there were adaptations in the pattern due to any of these evolutionary pressures. They quantified stripe patterns at 16 sites across the Plains zebra range, including stripe number, thickness, length, and color of saturation. They used a random forest model and a set of 19 predictive variables to see which environmental variables could explain the variance in the stripes. I will try my best to explain a random forest model. It's a form of machine learning that uses decision trees. Each tree gives a suggestion to the question provided, and then the algorithm then looks at the suggestions from all the different trees and picks the most popular choice. So in this case, it would look at the 19 predictive variables and see which ones, or one it thinks, explains the variation in the zebra stripe. They found that environmental variables could explain between 30 and 63% of the variance or difference in the patterns. The most consistently important variables were isothermality and mean temperature. So what that means in normal language is temperature was a significant predictor of zebra stripe patterns across the entire range in Africa. Now, despite this finding in 2014, the prevailing thought on why zebras have stripes now is for fly deterrence and not for cooling or to confuse predators. There are multiple fly species that are known to attack zebras, including tabanid or horseflies, glacynid or tsetse flies, and stomachus species, which are biting houseflies and dogflies. Aside from the painful bites and blood loss, these flies can also carry parasites, so it would be advantageous to not get bitten. And because I can't resist talking about parasites, here are some that can be transmitted by those flies. First is sleeping sickness, or Trypanosoma brucei. In humans, this presents as a sickness that includes behavior changes, confusion, sensory disturbances, and poor coordination. This is due to the parasite's presence in the central nervous system. This is usually fatal without treatment, and, as you can imagine, also can infect animals and is a huge problem for cattle populations in Africa. Another one is Loa loa. This is a filarial parasite, the kind that I studied. In humans, the worms can live in your eye, though they don't cause a lot of pathology, although they can be painful and cause some inflammation. So both types of parasites are ones that you would probably want to avoid getting if you were a zebra. But how exactly does this work? A group from Princeton, City University of New York, USC, and University of California, Los Angeles published a paper in Nature Scientific Reports in 2020 with their research on the mechanisms of flies not liking the stripes. They tested the landing choices of flies within the range that the flies should be able to see the stripes using real animal pelts, both striped zebra and plain impala pelts, and they used the pelts over live animals so that animal behavior could be factored out as part of the landing choice of the flies. So the idea was to see if the flies would avoid landing on the zebra stripes more than the impala pelt. They also salt-cured the pelts to remove the odor, and they used both wide-striped and narrow-striped zebra pelts. So what did they find? They found that the impact of stripes is likely in close range for the flies, so right before they were going to land. There was no difference in fly landing between wide stripes and narrow-striped pelts. When they do land, flies prefer the black stripes over the white striped, and they could not come to a conclusive hypothesis of why stripes are disliked so much by flies. However, not all stripes in the animal kingdom are used for bug repellent. Lizards have evolved longitudinal body stripes and colorful tails that are thought to confuse predators' attacks by a mechanism called motion dazzle. Motion dazzle is a type of defense coloration that operates when in motion, causing predators to misjudge the speed and the direction of object movement, and hopefully to miss striking the animal. Now, I don't know about you, but I love the phrase motion dazzle, and I think I'm going to be using that as my fashion philosophy going forward. All of my outfits should somehow involve motion dazzle. So stripes on animals seem almost self-explanatory, though I did learn a ton about zebras that I didn't know. So what other types of stripes can we find in science? And I'm going to be super honest about this. I found an article about charged stripes in graphene, and I thought in my hubris that I could read it and make a reasonable understanding of it, and I was astoundingly wrong. I might as well have been Greek to me, and I'm actually learning Greek, and it still didn't make any sense. So I backpedaled a bit and found a really helpful article from the Brookhaven National Laboratory, and a huge shout out to them for making a complex concept much easier to understand. Brookhaven is run by the U.S. Department of Energy, and research there includes energy science and technology, nuclear physics, nanoscience, and more. So the researchers at Brookhaven were looking at stripes in superconductivity. So superconductivity is the ability of some materials to carry electric current with no energy loss. So it seems that particular arrangements of electrical charges that scientists call stripes may contribute to superconductivity. Previous research from Brookhaven showed that magnetic spin stripes, or how adjacent atoms' spin directions are arranged, are compatible with superconductivity. In a paper published in 2013 in Physical Review Letters, scientists there looked at to see if alternating stripes of more or less densely packed atomic charges are associated with superconductivity. Discussions of atomic spin and charge densities, for me, can quickly get very embedded with jargon and can be a little bit challenging to tease out. So the article used a really helpful analogy. If you're looking at a parking lot, the lines of the parking spots are the positions of the atoms making up a crystal, because as we know, crystal has a very regular lattice structure that is pretty set. But the cars are the electrons, and the electrons can move around and do move around. If you took a picture of the parking lot to see if there was a pattern, that would be the magnetic spin. So say there was a red car, then a blue car, then a red car, then a blue car, right? That single shot picture would reflect the alternating magnetic spin. To visualize the charge density, you'd have to take a very long exposure shot, and it would all look like a big blur. So how do scientists get around this challenge of looking at charge density? What they did is they looked for a proxy, a signature that suggests the presence of charge density stripes, but is much easier to measure. So they ground up crystals and placed them in a neutron beam. And at first they saw atoms displaced in a regular way. So think parking spots that are wide and then narrow and then wide and then narrow. And these displacements force the electrons to follow a striped arrangement. So the cars would have to be a wider car, a narrower car, a wider car, a narrower car. With increasing temperature, the crystal structure changed, but the striped pattern of the charge density remained. This is useful because it could be a signature to look for superconductor materials, and it's less expensive and takes less time than previous methods. So it appears that stripes, and in this case, electron stripes, are heavily involved with superconductors. But why is that important? So superconductors are currently used for what are called maglev, or magnetic levitation trains, and in magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI. They could also be the key for faster computing power and a much more efficient electricity conduction for national grids, or, say, if you needed to put a grid on the moon. I'd say that's pretty impressive. So that's all the stripes I have for the moment, and so let's move on to our glossary. Today we learned the following words: melanin, dark brown, black pigment in hair, skin, and the iris of your eyes. A random forest model is statistics that compare different decision trees and decides on what is the most likely association. Motion dazzle, which, although you can't see me, you have to trust I am doing that with jazz hands, are defensive markings that throw off the predator's strike when in motion. And superconductivity is the ability to carry electric current with no energy loss. And now for our fun facts. Number one fun fact, since it's about to be bug season, is that zebras have stripes for bug repellent. And also stripes are responsible for superconductivity, which allows you to get an MRI. Thank you for going on this journey into stripes with me. I have to admit that I wasn't expecting to find out many of the things that we learned. The history was fascinating and the science, of course, was cool. And it included parasites. Always a win in my book. If you learned something new, please pass it on to a friend by sharing the podcast. And don't forget to click that subscription button. Nothing is more satisfying than a good click. LuxeSci Podcast is an Erevna Media production, produced by me, Dr. Lex. Audio engineer is Dr. Dimos, and our theme music is Harlequin Mood by Burdy. You can find us all over social media at LuxeSci Pod. Feel free to drop us a line. We always love to hear from you. Until next time. And now for a little snippet of a podcast that we're really enjoying, and we hope you enjoy it too.
In a world where the tiniest elements make the biggest impact, where curiosity leads to groundbreaking discoveries, it's time to delve deeper than ever before. Welcome to Under the Microscope, the podcast that zooms into the captivating world of materials and nanoscience. With each episode, you meet a scientist working in the field of materials or nanoscience. On Under the Microscope, the scientist candidly talks about their career journey, their favorite research experiment, and their 3 wishes to improve the world. Check out Under the Microscope on your favorite podcast app.